wife's 2012 GMC Terrain. It has the 2.4 liter EcoTec engine. If you do a quick Google search on it, the engine is plagued by a couple of different issues, one of which GM actually just reached a settlement for a piston ring seal issue and an oil consumption issue. The engines are also well known for timing chain noise. The chain stretches, the tensioner isn't able to compensate, and then the chain slaps around the inside the timing case. This probably started making a little bit of timing chain noise right around the 65,000 mile mark, which is actually really common. The car right now has about 99,000, just shy of 100, and we started up, went out to breakfast one day, and came back out of the parking lot, fired it up, and I mean, it was just making a terrible noise. So made it home. Luckily, didn't have to pay for a tow. Also, it didn't end up wiping the engine, which I'm extremely grateful for. So I cut the engine belt. You can see there's no belt on the alternator there. Fired the car up, and the noise didn't go away. Originally, I was hoping that it was just going to be an accessory drive noise, like something with tensioner pulley. It wasn't. So got online, went to rockauto.com. Rock Auto had some of the best pricing on parts, and they also had some of the best selection of parts. So I have ordered the timing chain kit. That's going to come with the new chain, new slides, new guides, new tensioners. It's also going to come with your 2 new solenoids here for your variable valve timing. Then while I was in there, you can do the balance shaft chain set, just as bad as the timing chain. So we're going to have this engine down and tore apart that far. Might as well just do both. So as you can see, I have already gotten a lot of the plastics off the front of the engine here. I have the intake covered in plastic. Pulled the airbags out of there for extra room. So next steps will be to pull the coil packs, will be to pull the valve cover. Then over here on the side, not sure how well you can see it, there's a plug here that is for one of your guide bolts. The tensioner is on the back side of the engine here. If you get into All Data DIY, pay for a membership. They have yearly, and they have a 5-year membership. Overall, not terribly priced. They recommend actually removing the engine mount, at least the block here. So in order to do that, that requires supporting the engine. I don't have a proper support that would go from one side of your fender well to the next side of the fender well, and then it hooks the top side of the engine and holds the engine in place. So we're going to go ahead and do it the old-fashioned way, not necessarily the correct way, and it also involves a little bit of risk to the oil pan, but a block of wood and a jack. So what that's going to do is just support the engine from the bottom. It'll get us a little bit of extra room to work here. There's not a whole lot of room between the engine and the unibody assembly there. A lot of this work has to actually be done in through the wheel well. So we'll be pulling the wheel off. There's a plastic guard in there. Car's already jacked up and supported properly with jack stands. It's supposed to be an 8.5-hour job. We'll see how accurate that is. Alright, so I went ahead and got the 1/2-inch impact out. We pulled the wheel off, 22 millimeter on the lug nuts. This here is the plastic cover I was talking about. Looks like it's got 3 push pins. What that's going to do is it's going to give you access to your harmonic balancer and the bolt for the harmonic balancer. That's a slip fit, doesn't need a pull or anything to get it off. Look past the CV shaft here. Right there is the cover that we need to be getting into for the timing chain and engine balance shaft set. Alright, so I got the cover removed. You can see much better now that I got the harmonic dampener there. And then this is the cover right behind it that we need to get into. There's actually a casting here that we're going to go ahead and use as a pry point whenever we get done removing all of the perimeter bolts for the cover. Another thing to note here is this hole right here is actually an access point for the bolt head to the belt tensioner. Alright, just a quick update from where we left off last. I went ahead and got the engine mount out of here. You can see the jack, the block of wood just sitting right there on the bottom side of the oil pan. You put just enough tension, take some of the weight off the engine. Engine mount on these are actually really simple. So what we have here is the 3 top bolts. This is the mount itself. It's 2 bolts here just that go to the unibody, and then this is the aluminum block that all data tells you to remove. It's 3 bolts on the side of the block. They're a little tight to get in and out. The first one, which mounts here, that one comes right out, there's no interference. Second one right there, it comes right out, no interference. Third one has to come out with the block. There's not enough space between it and the subframe for the bolt just to clear. So the wife's been out here, she gave me a hand. I gave her a couple of tasks to take care of. She's got the coils popped out, the clips disconnected. She's got all the bolts out of the valve cover. So now we get to get into the engine and see exactly what was going on, what the culprit of the noise was. So I'm going to reposition the camera. I'm going to need 2 hands for this, and I'll get right back to you guys. Alright, should have a pretty good angle for you guys to see exactly what's going on. Once I get this off, I'll go ahead and bring you in closer to where the timing gears, the timing chain is, so we can see what kind of slack we actually had. The gasket's sticking, so it's fighting me. Try and do this gently, not to break this evaporative hose. Also while not getting a ton of crud in the engine. Alright, so yeah, you guys will note that it is dirty. There's a lot of carbon in this engine. I have ran multiple motor flushes, engine flushes, before oil changes on this thing before. I'm actually not entirely happy what this looks like. So a little bit of history. Before I had met my wife, her dad was maintaining the engine. So he is a trucking business, and he's just using what was available to him. So the engine calls for 520 Dexos, I believe. First 40,000 miles of this engine's life, it was getting 1540 Shell Rotella. So I always thought that that's why this engine may have had some issues, was the incorrect oil. Now, after running into the issues with the cam, the ring seal, and doing some reading, you know, you Google it and you just find tons of information on this. I actually believe the 1540 may have been why this engine lasted up to this point before it started really giving me problems. Double-edged sword. But yeah, anyway, so the ring seals, more than likely why this thing has so much buildup in the engine. Since I've been servicing the car, I've been using Dexos, Mobile, just generally good quality stuff. You know, that's the other side of the ring seal that they don't tell you about, warn you about, or anybody really thinks about is, sure, you burn some oil, but now you're putting a bunch of carbon, a bunch of those burnt gases, into the crankcase of your engine. So for emissions, and actually better ring seal, a lot of that is plumbed back into the intake. Again, another issue with these engines is that a lot of oil sits in the intake. If I could get you guys a good shot, if I were to take the covering off of the intake inlet here and open up the throttle body, you'd actually see oil pooled in the bottom. So the PCV systems on these aren't fantastic either. Now they put these engines in you know, the terrains, they put them in the Equinox. I want to say there's a couple Buicks out there that may have this engine as well. Overall, I mean, it's been a good little engine, but it definitely has its issues and should last much longer without this type of service, you know, being needed. And that's just not the case. So the kit that I got actually has 2 new solenoids. This is another common issue, is the solenoids fail, and then you start throwing codes for variable valve timing problems and issues, and it throws the cams out of phase. So over here on this side of the engine, there's actually a pickup for cam position. You have a forward and you have a rear cam position sensors. Those can give you some fits as well, but primarily it's these solenoids here causing the codes. Super simple to replace. You don't have to pull the valve covers. You can see by the dirt right there that they're actually open to the rest of the engine bay. It's just one hold down bolt. You pop them out, make sure you lubricate the O-rings on the new ones, and you put them back in. Pay attention to where you pull each one. The plugs themselves are orientated that you can't get the plugs backwards, but I believe you can install these in the wrong positions. I would hope that GM engineered different bore sizes to prevent that, but without pulling one, taking a look at it and letting you guys know, I can't say that for certain. So I'm gonna take this top tensioner off here real quick. Right now I shouldn't be able to push down on this chain link as easily as I do. Now I get this tensioner out of here, I'll bring the focus of the camera in here, and we should actually see a large amount of slop. Of course, when you're dealing with an open engine, you want to be extremely careful. You don't drop anything into the engine. No fasteners, no pieces, parts, no dirt, debris, any foreign material. That'd be a bad day. Grab the camera. So here's the chain. This should be running under tension. And I mean, that's not terrible, but that's not great. Oh, never mind. Okay, so I just moved the cam phaser back. to a slack position, and that's terrible. That would explain all the noise. Yeah, look at the droop in that chain. Okay, so now we're this far. I'm gonna go ahead and get this side cover here off, get the crank pulley off, roll this thing around the top dead center. Compression stroke number 1. So quick way to do that is just set a screwdriver in there, rotate the engine around until the screwdriver comes all the way up. So the way that this thing is timed, the keyway for the crank pulley should be at 12 o'clock, and then there should be some timing marks here on the chain, but I don't know how much that we're going to be able to see because of the age of the chain. Alright, so you'll see here that I have the screwdriver sitting down number 1. When the piston is down, this shoulder here actually sits in the recess for the spark plug and the coil. I used the GoPro actually as an aid. So I was down in the wheel well turning the crank over clockwise in the direction of the engine rotation, and by doing that I was able to watch my phone, watch the GoPro, and actually watch the screwdriver come up. So as you rotate, you know, your cams and your chains all going to travel in this direction. So you watch your cam lobe rolls around, it'll hit your valve follower, open up your exhaust valves, and then whenever your exhaust valves close, that's when your piston is traveling down on the intake stroke. So if you look at all data, they actually tell you to have the timing marks and the cam phasers here at an 11 and like a 1 o'clock position. So you can see here that after that, verifying with the screwdriver that everything was up top dead center. You can see here these little bosses right here. Can't really tell with the lighting on the camera, but there's a little arrow right there. And then same thing over here. You have these 2 little castings, and then there's an arrow in between these castings. So that's putting the exhaust at 11 o'clock, and that's putting the intake about 1. So now that the engine's top dead center, we can go ahead and get that out of there. As soon as the cover's off, I'll try to get a good view of what all's going on in there. So I got the side cover off, gaskets off. Took a little bit of finessing. There's 2 dowels that the cover sits on for alignment of the gasket and the cover whenever you're installing it. The dowels are steel, the cover is aluminum. You're going to have some corrosion, so just have to work it back and forth. The cover is really thin. You want to make sure that you don't crack it and set yourself back. So as you can see here, you know, we're looking at the chain slop. I'm getting ready to actually take this cam actuator off. I've already pulled the tensioner out of the back side. You can see down in there the cover's off, and there's the engine and all the inner workings. The very first chain is your timing chain. The chain in behind it is your balance shaft change. You will lose a little bit of oil whenever you open it up. It's just oil sitting in the oil pump and oil sitting in the chain tensioner. We'll start with the exhaust actuator, and then we'll be pulling the intake actuator. We'll get the guide, old guide, up out. As far as I can tell, the actual guides themselves are still in okay condition. There might be some wear to them, but this chain just has that much slop in it. I can sit here and skip teeth on this chain. So well wore out. Alrighty, I'll get back when I get to the next point. Alright, timing chain is out. The chain has to be removed from the top. There's two castings which are for bolt holes that the chain has to make their way around, and it does not make the bend if it goes downward. So if you drop it, you have to fish it back up to the top, a little bit of finessing, and it comes right out. As you can see, I got both of the camshaft actuators removed. They take little to no effort. There's actually this hex cast into the camshaft. The dealership has a tool that interlocks the camshaft sprockets and the phasers, and then it rests against the casting in the head, and it takes all the tension and the torque off of the chain, off the camshafts. I, however, do not have that, so a 15/16 wrench actually fits these really well. Just have to make sure you limit the amount of camshaft rotation. This is an interference engine, and what that means is with the piston at the top dead center, if the valves were to open, then they will crash into the top side of the piston. That will result in engine damage. So one of the possibilities is there's differences in the engine family here. So what you can see is right here and down here there's a notch cut in the side of the camshaft, and that is actually a timing reference mark. So if you get into all data DIY, you look up the procedure. There's two different engines, two different procedures, and then that means that these marks will be in two different places. If yours doesn't match up, don't freak out. Look at the next one, see if they're where you're supposed to be. So this is your exhaust camshaft, this is your intake camshaft. These marks are supposed to be at 7, this is closer to 6, but that is the resting spot on the cam where the tension is off the valves. And then this one here is about 11, and that's about spot on with 11. So crankshaft sitting at 12 o'clock, keyway is all the way up, timing mark is supposed to be at 5 o'clock. Right now this engine is set and sitting to go back together with all new parts and be timed properly and have no issues. Again, I didn't find any issues with the slides themselves, so the chain must have just been that wore out at that point. So now the engine's down this far. You can see all of the stuff for the balance shafts, which keeps the engine running smoothly. I've heard multiple people say that if the timing chain is bad, then the balance shaft chain and water pump chain, mind you, the water pump is driven by this chain, they're usually in similar condition. So I went ahead and ordered the parts, and while I got it down this far, we're going to go ahead and do it all. I have all the old balance shaft, chain, guides, and tensioner and gears off of the engine currently. Right here we are looking at the kit from Cloyles. Part number is right there. That is a 9-4202S. Kit comes with a new crank sprocket for the balance shafts. Comes with these 3 new guides, of course the chain, and I don't have it here, but this is one of the balance shaft sprockets. Then of course the tensioner, grenade pin included. These are torqued to about 37 foot-pounds, so that's what we're going to be reinstalling them at. I don't intend on having this thing apart again. So I'm going to go ahead and use some blue Loctite, just in case. We will be reusing the fastener. So everything is reusable except for the two camshaft sprockets. They're torque to yield, and the crankshaft sprocket, or sorry, crankshaft bolt is also torque to yield. What that means is the bolt stretches. Once it's stretched, it doesn't hold the same clamping force, so then it has to be replaced. New crank sprockets in, new balance shaft sprockets are in. Did not touch the water pump sprocket. Did not come in the kit. Honestly, tooth wear was probably minimal. The balance sprockets may not even need to changed. So here's a fixed guard, there's a fixed guard, and this is your adjustable guard. Sorry, guides. The fastener bolts for the fixed guards or guides are 106 inch-pounds, and then the two mounting bolts for the tensioner itself, and then the adjustable guide is 89 inch-pounds. So the intake balance shaft has a gold chain link that is designed to line up with the arrow on the coils kit. And then the rest of the chain here has two black links. Those will line up with the arrows, and then this dot down here. As long as this link, and the gold link are lined up with the arrows, as you're assembling this, everything is timed. There's a flat spot that controls the orientation to the arrows on both balance shafts. I pulled the pin on the adjuster. Everything's good, nice and snug and tight. Everything lines up. We're ready to proceed to the timing chain set.